Good morning, everyone. My name is Ibrahima Soare, Senior Community Development Officer with LISC New York City. Welcome to today's information session on the PACT Resource Team request for qualification. Today, we have assembled members of the LISC programs team to be able to go over the information regarding the PACT RFQ. In addition to that, we've also have one of our key partners of Public Works that also share information in regards to what we're seeking to do in establishing this partnership. Before we begin, some few housekeeping rules. You all have joined. I believe you should not be able to unmute yourself, but if you are able to, please keep yourselves muted. If you do have any questions or comments, please utilize the chat box for your comments. And if there are any specific questions, please utilize the Q&A. We've set aside time at the end to be able to review each and every question that has been submitted. With that being said, I now welcome our Executive Director of the LISC New York City team, Ms. Valerie White.
There we go. All right, good morning all. I am Valerie White, Executive Director of LISC NYC, and on behalf of LISC NYC, I'm thrilled to welcome you to this information session on how to become part of the PACT Resource Team. First, I would like to thank the New York City Housing Authority for making this resource available to residents who are going through the PACT investment process. This program is designed to ensure that public housing residents can meaningfully plan for the future of their communities, and that's critically important. I would also like to thank Public Works Partners, the program administrator for the newly created PACT Resource Team, along with LISC NYC, Pratt Institute, and Public Policy Lab. We're proud to be working alongside these exceptional partners who are committed to making sure that the voices and the needs of residents are central to the PACT investment process. We at LISC NYC are part of the PACT Resource Team because it aligns with our mission. We believe that the time has come to forge a future for New York City that eradicates the racial wealth gap for good, protects affordable housing for low to moderate income New Yorkers, and builds pathways of meaningful economic opportunity for all. And this program is designed to provide the tools for residents and public housing to create that future. We hope that those of you in the audience today who have skills and knowledge and shared commitment to equity and inclusion will join us in this work by becoming part of the PACT Resource Team and providing direct technical assistance to residents. Today, you will learn about the process for applying to become qualified as part of the pool of PACT Resource Team service providers who will be on call to work with residents over the next 4 years. We welcome a broad range of nonprofits, private firms, and independent practitioners to apply. As part of LISC NYC's commitment to racial equity and the New York City Housing Authority's support of MWBEs, we encourage applicants from BIPOC-led organizations and firms across the city and consulting practices to apply. We also encourage applications from certified SBEs, MBEs, and WBEs, as well as from community-based organizations and other nonprofits. So with that, I will turn this over to LISC NYC's Deputy Director, Eva Egan, who is leading our work on this initiative and will walk you through today's agenda. Thank you, and I will now turn it over to Eva.
Thank you, Valerie, and welcome everyone to today's session. Again, my name is Eva Egan, and I'm the Deputy Director of LISC New York City. As Valerie said, today we'll walk you through what types of services we're looking for and how to become a member of the PACT Resource Team. So today's agenda includes some background on PACT and the PACT Resource Team, an overview of the RFQ and what we're looking for, the submission requirements for your application, and we'll have time at the end for questions and answers where we will, as best as we can, answer whatever questions you have that you put in the chat box. As a reminder, this meeting will be recorded and you'll be able to access the recording as well as the PowerPoint presentation and some of the questions and answers at the end. And we'll be putting this up on LISC's website in the next few days. So with that, I'd like to welcome our partner, Allison Quigley, Principal of Public Works Partners, who will provide you with some background on the PACT program and how the PACT Resource Team works. So Allison, take it away. Thanks.
Thank you, Eva. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Quigley at Public Works Partners, the lead program administrator for the PACT Resource Team, and we're really excited to have you all here today. As Eva said, I'm just going to share some background on both PACT and the resource team. So as many of you are aware, NYCHA needs $40 billion to fully renovate and modernize its housing. But the federal government has provided only a fraction of the funding needed. Through PACT, which stands for Permanent Affordability Commitment Together, developments are included in the Rental Assistance Demonstration, or RAD, and convert to a more stable, federally funded program called Project-Based Section 8. PACT unlocks funding to complete comprehensive repairs while keeping homes permanently affordable and ensuring residents have the same basic rights as they possess in the public housing program. PACT works through public-private partnerships. Under this model, NYCHA leases the land and buildings to private and nonprofit development partners who conduct all of the necessary repairs, serve as the new on-site property manager, and provide enhanced social services and community programs on site. When a development is in PACT, NYCHA continues to have a role, but their role changes. NYCHA will continue to manage each resident's subsidy, and so residents still come to NYCHA to certify their income, and NYCHA will set their rent. NYCHA is also responsible for monitoring conditions to make sure things are going well with their new property management team. Fundamentally, residents of developments that participate in PACT will remain NYCHA residents, but under a new model that brings in the resources of private partners. The HUD regulations governing this program require that the PACT investment addresses all documented repair needs. At a high level, the different categories of investment shown on the next slide are what the PACT program typically addresses. So if we go to the next slide, we can show these are the things that PACT works on: sites and grounds, including public plazas, playgrounds, and pedestrian areas; buildings, including lobbies, hallways, and stairwells in both residential buildings and community centers; building systems such as heat and hot water plants, roofs, facades, and elevators; and then the apartments, where developers typically replace all kitchens, bathrooms, floors, and windows, and sometimes even go behind the walls and replace things like old plumbing. All of these renovations happen while residents remain in their homes. The PACT program can offer unprecedented investment in NYCHA developments, but it also represents huge changes for residents, which is where the PACT Resource Team comes in. So on the next slide, you'll see the PACT Resource Team was created to support residents in advocating for their needs during the PACT process. As Valerie mentioned, Public Works Partners, along with LISC NYC, Public Policy Lab, and Pratt Institute act as the program administrators. Our role is to work with NYCHA residents to identify what services they need and then connect them to organizations like yours who can provide direct technical assistance to residents in the PACT program. Since this summer, we've been working with NYCHA staff and residents to design the program, and in particular have been getting input from residents who have already been involved in PACT to understand where external resources could help. And in the past few months, we've been meeting with resident leaders who are currently involved in the program to understand what services they're interested in. So far, we're getting interest in things ranging from engagement to support to help choosing the development partners. This next slide gives you a better sense of the process from the resident's perspective. Typically, our team will meet with resident leaders early on, close to when the development finds out it's part of PACT. We'll meet with the resident leaders several times to introduce ourselves and the PACT Resource Team and to talk about what services they might want. Then we'll launch a widespread needs assessment to gauge interest from the wider resident population. The information we learn from these conversations will help us to determine the services the development will get. And that's where organizations like yours will come in. After we identify the services, we'll develop a scope and reach out to providers to respond to the specific scopes for each PACT project. As you can see from the RFQ, there's a wide spectrum of services, some of which may be relevant earlier in the program. That's that phase 1 service provision on the slide, and some later on. And with that brief overview of the PACT Resource Team, I want to reiterate how excited we are to have you all here today and to be at this point. And now I'll turn things back to Eva.
Thank you, Allison, for that really helpful overview. I think it really provides some helpful context to what we're going to dive into today. As I said earlier, what I'm going to do next is provide you with an overview of the request for qualifications and what we're looking for. So this request for qualifications is looking for specific types of service providers. As Valerie described earlier, LISC New York City and Public Works partners are seeking to create a pool of qualified technical assistance providers who can be tapped to support NYCHA residents to have a voice and play a meaningful role throughout the PACT investment process. That is the critical function of this whole initiative, and it's core to what we're doing. One of the most important functions of PACT Resource Team members will be to build the capacity of NYCHA resident leaders to facilitate broader resident engagement, again, tied in with this mission really of making sure residents are a crucial part of the process and have a voice and play a role in the decision making. Another important function will be to support residents to play other critical roles in identifying needs and priorities for investment, selecting PACT partner teams of developers, general contractors, property managers, and social service providers, informing the physical design of developments, planning for new property management, and augmenting social services and economic empowerment resources. So these are all things that Allison pointed out are part of the PACT investment process. And this list really illustrates that we are, through this initiative, seeking to support residents in being a part of the decisions or prioritization in all of these different areas I mentioned. So what type of service providers are we looking for? We're looking for a broad range of types of providers to become part of the pool. And as Valerie mentioned, nonprofit organizations, private firms, and independent practitioners. Examples can include community-based organizations, many of whom already have existing long-term relationships with various NYCHA developments and NYCHA residents. Also architecture and planning firms, legal aid providers, private consultants, community organizers, and a whole host of other range of firms and practitioners with experience in our designated service areas, which we'll go over in greater detail later in the presentation. Again, to reiterate what Valerie mentioned, we really encourage BIPOC-led firms along with SBEs, MBEs, WBEs, and nonprofits to apply. Now, entities do not have to be based in New York City. We're really excited about this because with the pandemic, we've all learned to work virtually, and we know there are all sorts of organizations and firms around the country that have experience in working with public housing residents going through similar processes. And we want to tap into that knowledge base and experience and learn from what they have done in other parts of the country. So if you are one of those organizations, please do apply to become qualified. You may be able to provide the service virtually, or you may be able to visit New York City to provide those services, depending on what the scope of services is. Now with that, I am going to talk to you about how the RFQ process will work. During the initial open application window, which is taking place right now, and will end, just as a reminder, on March 7th at 11:59 p.m., we're asking interested providers to submit an online application which describes your interest in becoming part of the PACT Resource Team and your experience, your knowledge, cultural competency, track record, and capacity to deliver quality services in the areas outlined in the RFQ. After the application window closes, we will have a selection committee reviewing all the completed applications and will determine which service providers are qualified to be included in this initial pool of PACT Resource Team providers. Applications submitted after the deadline will not be considered for inclusion in this initial pool of qualified PACT Resource Team providers, but will be reviewed at a later date. And we will be periodically throughout this entire program refreshing the pool and giving entities or different firms the opportunity to apply at later dates. But again, in order to become part of the pool at this stage, you need to submit your application by March 7th. We anticipate announcing the pool of qualified PACT Resource Team providers in April 2022. Please note that being qualified for the pool does not guarantee work under this program. As Allison described, as particular rounds of NYCHA developments go through the PACT investment process, LISC and Public Works partners will be releasing scopes of services for providers to respond to. That is, the providers that have been qualified to be part of the PACT Resource Team. Those scopes will be based on the needs assessments that Public Works is conducting at each PACT development. Consultants who are part of the PACT Resource Team will be able to submit specific proposals for services based on those scopes. And once we select a consultant for a particular scope of services, LISC will then enter into contract with that provider. So while being pre-qualified does not guarantee that your organization or firm will receive a contract, it will position you to be considered for relevant opportunities as they arise. And all the information you submit in your application is going to help us determine which pool, sub-pool, I should say, within the pool is appropriate for each opportunity. So if you said you were interested in providing PACT 101 services, then everybody who checked that in their application will have the opportunity to respond to specific scope of services related to that particular technical assistance need. We will dive into each element of the RFQ application shortly, but please note that responses must be submitted via the online portal link, and somebody from the LISC New York City team can drop that into the chat box so everybody has it handy. And one other thing I want to note is that the application cannot be started and saved for a later date. So you'll need to complete it all at one time. And that's why we've provided a PDF version of the RFQ with all the questions so that you can prepare everything and submit everything at once when you're ready to do that. Now I'm going to just go through a few other items. The pre-qualification checklist, it's pretty kind of basic. You must meet the following eligibility criteria in order to be considered for pre-qualification. And that's that you must disclose any existing work with NYCHA or NYCHA residents. That does not, disclosing that particular work is not going to preclude you from any opportunities as part of the PACT Resource Team. We just need that information in order to assess which providers are the best fit for which development. If you are, and as an aside to that, if you're part of, let's say, a social service team that's on a PACT development team, you will not be able to provide technical assistance at that same development, but you are eligible to provide services, technical assistance services at other developments. So that's one of the main reasons why we need to know if you have existing work with NYCHA or NYCHA residents. Also, obviously, we are going to want to know that you have relevant experience in the service areas that you're interested in providing. So that's a big part of the basic qualifications. And finally, the other main pre-qualification criteria is that you attest that you will adhere to the required contract provisions, policies, and procedures, which I will review shortly. Now, the selection criteria are applications will be evaluated based on the applicant's relevant experience, knowledge, cultural competency, track record, and capacity to deliver quality services. So pay attention to that list as you're submitting your application so that we can get a good sense that you meet all of those criteria. Now, the contract provisions are basically key NYCHA policies and procedures that you will need to adhere to. So in the application, as well as the PDF version of the RFQ, you're going to have links that you can review to these 4 basic policies and procedures: the general rules of behavior for on-site consultants, sexual harassment prevention policy, privacy policy, and internet policy. So we want to make sure upfront that you're familiar with those policies and that you, in your application, attest that you will adhere to all of those policies. The other thing I want to point out is that LISC will require most providers selected for service contracts as part of the PACT Resource Team to have insurance coverage consistent with the PACT Resource Team consultant insurance requirements. That is a mouthful, and it is linked in the RFQ as well as the application. So please review it. It's a 1-page document. I will note that if your organization does not have the requisite coverage, we encourage you to continue with your application submission. Please do still submit your application. We know that some of you that are interested in applying may be a small firm, a solo practitioner, or for some reason don't have that insurance. In certain circumstances, LISC may be able to adjust the requirements depending on the scope of services you're hired for, or provide options for obtaining the coverage. So we encourage you to just let us know that you don't have the insurance on that 1-pager that you'll review. And you have a place on the application to indicate that you'd like to speak to LISC about that, and we will discuss options available. So with that overview, I'm going to turn things over to the LISC New York City programs team members, community development officers, Taylor Crawford and Leah Martins-Krasner, who will each walk you through specifics of the actual application. So with that, Taylor, take it away.
Thank you so much, Eva. Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Crawford, Community Development Officer with LISC NYC. So now we will move on to covering some of these specific submission requirements for this RFQ, specifically starting with your firm's organization or organization-specific interests and experience. So moving on to the next slide, we will start with your statement of interest. So you will be required to submit a written statement of 250 words or less to really explain your firm or organization's interest in providing these services to NYCHA residents and being a part of the PACT Resource Team. However, we also welcome you to submit an optional video statement of 2 minutes or less. And we chose to include that as an option because we wanted to include just a different format for you to really be able to explain who you are, why you're passionate about this work, and why you want to be a part of the PACT Resource Team. So if you do choose to submit the 2-minute or less video, you can allow your written statement to be a little bit shorter since it will be explained kind of in that video statement. The next section is the geographic reach of services. So as Eva mentioned, we are really excited that we welcome firms and organizations both from within or outside of New York City to apply. But for this section, we really want to know if you are a firm or organization within New York City, specifically kind of what your geographic reach looks like. So specifically a description of whether you offer services citywide or if you focus on a specific borough or neighborhood. For applicants outside of New York City, we really want to know if you have offered services within New York City, kind of an explanation of what that looks like and if it was in person or virtual. And then lastly on this slide, experience working with NYCHA or NYCHA residents. As Eva explained, that's not a requirement. However, we do require that you disclose any existing work with NYCHA or NYCHA residents as a part of the application process. Additionally, if you have worked with any public housing authorities or agencies in different cities, you don't have to include this in this portion of the application, but we do welcome you to explain what that work looks like in the experience section that I will explain on the next slide. So moving on here, now we will kind of get into the heart of the RFQ, which really is the service area. So this slide provides a brief overview of the 7 service areas that are included in this request for qualifications. As Allison described earlier, the team has extensively engaged residents and completed needs assessments to support and inform the overall development of these specific service areas. We do want to note that these areas may change and they will certainly vary depending on specific development needs. So quickly kind of going over these service areas. So first, PACT 101, that's will be really important in the beginnings of these engagements. And that's really providing residents with the baseline understanding of what PACT is and specifically what it means for their community. The PACT partner selection process, again, also really important in the beginning of these engagements. And that's really supporting residents in engaging in the PACT partner selection process and vetting their potential PACT partner development teams. The engagement support, that's providing kind of overall essential capacity building to the residents as they engage in the overall PACT partner selection process. Social service assessment and planning. So that's really supporting residents and will be essential in helping the residents identify any enhancements or improvements that they would like to see in the current social services that are being offered, and also help them identify any additional needs that they may have at their specific development. The design support, that is supporting residents with the actual visioning and selecting the priorities for the physical redesign of their specific development. Economic empowerment, that's supporting residents and identifying their overall economic empowerment needs, but also helping them connect to any existing resources that currently exist. And then last, property management planning. So that is equipping residents with the knowledge and expertise that's needed to truly vet the various property management partners that they may select to be a part of their PACT redesign process. So overall, in the application in this specific area, we really want your firm or organization to describe your relevant experience, your knowledge, your cultural competency, and overall track record and capacity to deliver quality services in one or more of these service areas. So we understand that you may not be able to provide services in all of these areas, but in the application, you will be able to select which areas you want to apply for, and then you can, again, specifically within those areas, explain the types of clients that you've worked with in the past that would be relevant to that area, any results that you've achieved, and you can also upload any written products or training courses that you have developed and delivered, and then kind of overall explain any experience that you specifically have related to those selected service areas. So with that overview, I will now pass things over to Leah to further explain the submission requirements.
Perfect. Thanks, Taylor. And hi, everyone. Leah Martins-Krasner, Community Development Officer here with LISC New York City. And I'm just going to go over some of the background information and additional attachments that we are requesting as part of this RFQ. So in addition to expressing your interest and your experience, we are also asking for everyone to submit their language capability. Speak a wide variety of languages, including but not limited to Spanish, Cantonese, Mandarin, and many others. So if your firm does have the capability to provide services in other languages, we ask that you designate them there. The next piece here would be the rates of your staff. So this would be the hourly rates of up to 3 members of your organization who would be delivering services. And this could be loaded rates, so they can include their base, fringe, and other admin expenses here. Then we'd follow with references. We're asking each organization to submit 3 references of people who are familiar with your work and your track record in the service areas that you designated interest in. These can include previously working with NYCHA residents, government officials, community residents, and any other relevant stakeholder who can really attest to your work experience in those areas. For this, we'd ask for their name, their affiliation, their contact information, and a brief description of how you worked with them or your affiliation with them. Next, we would ask for your work products, and this is really where you can kind of provide a demonstratable item that talks about your experience in the areas that you designated. So that can include presentations, webinars, videos, presentations around curriculum, really anything that speaks to that. We're asking for at least 1, but you can provide up to 7 items that basically demonstrate your interest and experience. And then lastly, we're also asking for the resumes or bios of the principals or leaders of your firm or organization. And you can also include 2 additional staff members who would be providing services. Again, this is really to get a sense of your organization. When you submit for an actual scope of work, then you could resubmit, but it's really just to get a sense as of right now. And then just as a reminder, everything should be included and submitted by March 7th at 11:59 through the portal. And with that, I will pass it back over to Eva to go over the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Leah and Taylor. You provided us with a lot of really useful, rich information, a lot to digest here today. So obviously we want to give a chance for the audience to ask their questions, get them answered. We'll do our best to answer the questions today. There may be some that we'll have to post answers to after the webinar. We will provide all that information along with the recording on our website, on our events page. We'll provide the link to that. So just as a matter of a reminder of how to participate in the Q&A session, please write your questions in the chat and our team will read them out. Before we get into that, I would like to acknowledge our key partner and thank our key partner, a key member of the New York City Housing Authority real estate team. We have Heather Beck, who's the senior policy analyst in that real estate department. And she is on hand in case any questions come up that are really better suited for a person from NYCHA to respond to. She is on standby for that. So I wanted to acknowledge and thank her for joining us today and being our partner in all of this. So with that, I'm going to ask the team, I'm getting assistance from Leah and Taylor in reading out any questions we have so far.
Sure. So we can go ahead and get started with the first question. The first one that we received is, what, if any, involvement is there with round 10 residents?
I'm sorry, Taylor, that you cut out just right after you said round. I didn't hear the last part of that.
Sorry about that. What, if any, involvement is there with round 10 residents?
Okay, I am going to ask Allison to please take that one on.
Yeah, absolutely. We are not currently working with round 10 residents, but we anticipate doing so relatively soon. So the intention is really for us to work with all of the residents or all of the developments going through PACT. They're just at different stages. So when we start talking to folks, differs depending where they are right now. So we will be talking to them soon and working with them in the same way.
Thank you, Allison. So I think with that, we're ready for the next question, team.
Sure. So the next question is, can you describe the PACT partner selection process and what service might look like in this area?
So I'm not sure if the question is related to becoming pre-qualified as part of the resource team pool, or if the question is related to what happens once you're a member of the qualified service PACT resource team. So let me just review that, both parts, since I'm not sure what the which part of it the question is asking about. So for the first part, which we've gone over today, there's the process of submitting the application and becoming qualified as part of the pool of providers that are going to be part of the PACT Resource Team. The selection process for that is going to be through a committee of the members of the program administrators for the PACT Resource Team. So that includes LISC New York City, who's hosting this workshop, and Public Works Partners. We are also working with Pratt Institute and Public Policy Lab. So all of the providers that are part of this PACT Resource Team will review the qualifications submitted of completed applications. And we will check that minimum criteria are met. And we will take a deep dive into the experience and qualifications submitted, and select pre-qualified providers who meet the minimum amount of experience needed to be able to conduct the service. So as long as you can show that you have some expertise and experience in the service area or areas that you've chosen, you will be part of that. You will become qualified as part of the pool, as long as you meet the other requirements that I mentioned earlier, like attesting that you'll abide by the policies and procedures and the other things that I mentioned. Now, the next part of the process, as I mentioned before, that does not, becoming part of the PACT Resource Team pool of service providers does not guarantee that you will have specific projects that you're contracted for. There's a second part of the process that happens after that. Once we get specific scopes of services that come out of the needs assessment process at each particular development that's going through the PACT investment process, those needs will be articulated by the residents and summarized. So we showed you the 7 service areas, though the residents will express what they want assistance with. So for example, they may say, we really want to focus on being involved in the partner selection process of picking which development partners are going to be part of PACT. Or in addition to that, they might want training on community engagement, resident engagement. There are a number of different service areas that they can choose to express a need for assistance with. Once we have that scope of services, we will put it out to the providers that have expressed an interest and have submitted their qualifications in those relevant service areas. And then we'll be seeking proposals. So that's when you have a chance to say specifically for that scope, this is how I go about providing that service. This is my fee. This is my availability. All of that specific kind of information that's really tied to a specific scope has to be submitted at that stage. And then at that stage, we will do a review of all the proposals submitted and select providers based on all the relevant kinds of selection criteria, like strong qualifications to conduct the service, competitive proposal around price and availability, capacity to do the work within the time period we're requesting, and all of those kind of criteria. So it's really a 2-stage process. And I hope that answers the person's question. Now, keep in mind, we're going to be having certain scopes of services in the same area across many different developments. So let's say you submit a proposal for a development in the Bronx, and you're not selected for that particular development. There'll be many other opportunities, presumably, along the way as we continue to put out specific scopes of services. Okay, so I'm ready for the next one.
Okay, this is a bit more specific question, but if an organization is already contracted with a developer who's awarded a PACT bid, can they still submit an RFQ for other sites?
Yes, very good question. I'm glad that question allows me to reiterate the point that you certainly, as a service provider, are not disqualified from providing services at another development if you are part of a PACT developer team. What you are not going to be qualified for is providing the technical assistance at that particular development where you're part of the PACT team, the developer team. So let's say you're a social service provider and you've been selected as part of a team as the PACT investment partner team. At that development, you won't be providing technical assistance, you'll be providing the services that you have been contracted for. But you could help residents at another development figure out what types of services they're looking for in the PACT investment process. That's perfectly legitimate, and we invite you to submit your qualifications in that area and submit specific proposals when the opportunities come up. Okay, ready for the next one?
Great. So how frequently are needs assessments completed?
I'm going to kick that one over to Allison again.
Sure. Our plan and the intention is to make the resource team available to all of the developments that are participating in PACT, and we'll do a needs assessment with each of them. So frequency isn't like quite the right way to think about it. It's like each development we're working with, we will do a needs assessment with them pretty early on in the process of talking to them.
Thank you, Allison. Okay, I think we're ready for the next question.
Is there a desired number of consultant teams for the full pool or per service area, given the number of needs assessments anticipated in the coming year?
Well, we don't have a specific number, but I'll say that we really are looking for, I want to say the word robust and broad pool of providers. There's a lot of work to be done here. We're very excited that NYCHA has resourced this program and made it available to all the developments that are going to go through the PACT investment process. And there is going to be a lot of need across many different neighborhoods and different developments. So we might tap out if the one service area only has, let's say, 2 or 3 providers in the pool, we may tap them out really quickly based on the amount of work that we anticipate in the coming 4 years. So we really are trying to push the message out far and wide, encourage a lot of different providers to submit their qualifications, even if it's only in one service area, or even if they're only interested in, let's say you really only want to work in certain neighborhoods in the Bronx. That narrows the amount of scopes, the number of scopes that will come your way. But certainly, if you have specialized ties to a particular neighborhood or development and expertise that you think is relevant, please submit your qualifications. We'd like a broad pool. And again, I'm going to reiterate that right now, we're making this big push to create the initial provider pool, which we want to get started. We're aiming for April so that we can start tapping that pool for specific scopes that are coming up this year. But we will be providing opportunities throughout the program. Periodically, we'll reopen the provider pool or refresh the provider pool to add more providers. And we may see, for example, that in the initial pool, we didn't get enough applicants in a certain area. So we'll do really targeted outreach to make sure we have a robust pool for all the different needs that that the residents bring to us. Okay, next question.
All right. So to date, what service areas are most frequently grouped together based on resident need assessments?
Again, I think this one is a great one for Allison to answer.
Yes, sure, absolutely. Well, this is a good moment to state that this is a brand new program. So the answer is, to date, none, because we are in the midst of having our conversations with several of the developments who are currently going through PACT. So we're really doing our first round of needs assessments. So we'll be able to answer that question soon. But at this point, we are still working with the residents to figure out what they're going to need.
Thanks, Allison. Okay, ready for the next question.
Okay. Can one submission include a 2-organization team agreement, for example, a nonprofit and an MWBE, or does each individual need to apply individually?
I would say yes, please submit your application separately as the entity that you are part of. But having said that, if you want to indicate that there's a specific reason why you typically partner with a particular organization or are interested in doing the work in a certain way, because you have existing relationships or think that your services are complementary, feel free to mention that as you fill out the application and tell us about which service areas you're interested in. But we do need each applicant to submit their own set of qualifications because there is a vetting process to determine, first of all, whether you are going to become part of the qualified pool, and then subsequently, which providers will be sent the scope of services to respond to and provide proposals for. So again, it's we'd love to hear about any existing relationships you have or ways that you do your work in partnership with other groups, but submit your applications separately. Okay, ready for the next one.
Okay, with the resume section, to confirm if selected, can we make adjustments to the people included if there are staffing changes?
Absolutely. And I want to reiterate that the reason why we say up to 3 either bios or resumes uploaded into the application is that we want to get a sense of the capacity you have on your team to deliver the services that you describe. But we understand that this is just a like firm or organizational information that you submit at the time that you're, this time in March or February 2022. And we know that as you receive specific opportunities to respond to scopes of services, circumstances will change. You'll either be super busy with other projects or you'll have openings. You may have changes on your team. And so at that point, when you respond with a specific proposal and scope, that's when you can tell us specifically who you plan to have working on the project, and also provide us with more information about cost. Because again, we understand that at this point, you're providing us with an overview type of information that we can evaluate for informational purposes. Okay, next question.
Okay. Is there a conflict of interest if NYCHA residents are consultants or business owners? So I'm assuming if they would like to reply to the RFQ, but NYCHA resident.
That's an interesting question. I don't think there's a conflict of interest. I do want to give Allison a chance to talk about the opportunities that are going to exist for NYCHA residents to be part of this and the roles that are anticipated. In terms of being, if you're a resident of NYCHA and you have service qualifications to provide some of the services that we're asking for, certainly I think I'll say, and we can verify after this session just to make sure I state this correctly, but I would say if you're a provider of that service, please do submit your qualifications. And the only, I guess, thing that I would say is that we would ask that you provide the services not in your own development in the same way that we're asking for service providers who are part of the PACT developer team not to provide the services in the same development where they're providing the services. But we hadn't actually anticipated very specifically that question, so I'm going to say we will post exactly the precise answer on our website. But certainly, you're not prohibited from submitting your qualifications. We welcome applications from everybody. And Allison, do you want to add anything about the opportunities for NYCHA residents?
Sure. Yeah, I would just add a slightly different aspect of the work. As part of this work, as we said, we're doing needs assessments at the developments that we're working with. Part of those needs assessments, we anticipate hiring outreach workers who are NYCHA residents primarily in order to really engage with the folks that they at each development to understand, to get the word out about what we're doing and to understand what services they might be interested in. So that's kind of another aspect of this project that we're really excited about as well.
Okay, thanks for that. All right. We have a few more minutes, so yeah, time for let's see how many more questions we get to. Ready for the next one.
All right. Are you able to explain in more detail what supports the PACT to offer residents post-conversion?
Post-conversion, okay. I don't know, Allison, if you want to take that one, or we could ask Heather to answer.
Yeah, I think we should. I think the answer is we don't know. To be very honest, I think, yeah, that is what I would say. I think we can think about that a little bit more and see if we can provide more detail in a response afterwards. But certainly the vast majority of our thinking has been about, from the beginning of the process through the conversion.
Okay, great. Next question.
Sure. There's a question about how organizations should present their experience specifically, I guess, in the upload section. Is there a limit as far as font size and page limits?
I'm gonna kick that over to the programs team at LISC New York City who created the application. I don't think, I know there are some word limits and character limits within the questions, but in terms of the upload function, we might have to get back to people on this. I don't know if there's a limit. Taylor or Leah, do you know that?
If there is a word limit, it'll designate it. Otherwise, you should just be able to put as much as you need. As far as uploading, you should be able to upload. There may be size specifications, and we can post those, but we'd have to double check exactly what they are.
Okay, that's another question. We'll have to get back to folks on the precise answer to that. Okay. All right, ready for one or two more questions.
All right, so for New York City-based architecture, interior, and urban planning firms, can you give examples of project scopes coming through this program that a firm of this description would be considered for?
I don't think we don't have specific scopes out yet, so I don't think we can be specific. I will say, if the question is how are architecture and planning services relevant to this opportunity, it's clearly they are. And if you look at the service areas, there's design support in there. So certainly there are a lot of, there's need for that type of technical assistance service. Again, we don't have a specific development to present to you in terms of a development that has asked for that, because as Allison mentioned, we're just at the beginning stages here and we haven't put any scope of services out yet for a particular development. Do you want to add anything to that, Allison, what I just said?
That sounds correct.
Okay. So we do encourage you, architecture and planning firms that are on the call or listen to this recording later, please do submit your qualifications. We do anticipate the need for that type of service. Okay, ready for the next question.
Okay, we received a few questions related to this. So when chosen as a service provider, how long would the relationship last, or how long would a service provider expect to be a part of the PACT process?
Okay, so with that one, it's really, you're going to get that kind of detail when you receive the specific call for proposals with a specific scope for a development. So I think, again, to go over what the process is going to look like, Public Works and their team is doing needs assessments, a needs assessment process with each round and each development going through PACT. And that will then inform the scope of services that we put out to the providers that are in the pool. And so at that point, you'll get more specifics on the particular development, the expected length of engagement, exactly what we're looking for. But we can't be universal in that because this is a program we're very excited to say that is very tailored to the specific circumstances of that development and what the residents have asked for. So it's not a one size fits all, and we can't at this stage of the process tell you exactly that kind of information. It's really going to be tailored to the specific development. Okay, next question. I think we have, I see it's 11:57, so I'm going to say we have room for one more question. So team, pick the one that seems the most universal at this point. And again, I want to say we will be, if for folks who put questions in the chat box that we didn't get to, we will take a look at those and answer them as best as we can in written form and post on our website. But go ahead and pose the last question, Leah or Taylor.
Sure. So will the list of providers be made publicly available?
Yes, there's no reason to. Yes, we will announce the list of pre-qualified providers once we have made that initial selection. Okay, so I think that we're almost at time, and I would like to take the opportunity just to give some last reminders, some closing reminders. Again, I just think it's really important to emphasize how excited we are to have folks step forward and be part of this with us. We think this is really so crucial to making the PACT investment process really work for residents and make sure to put some decision-making and voice into that process. And we're thankful that NYCHA has created the program and that we're able to reach out to a broad pool to be a part of this with us. So please do apply. Again, a reminder, the applications for this first round of pre-qualification, the applications are due March 7th at 11:59 p.m. They must be submitted via the online portal, which can be accessed on LISC New York City's website. And applications that are submitted at the deadline, after the deadline, or that are not complete will be considered, will not be considered for the initial pool of qualified PACT Resource Team providers, but there will be a chance to review complete applications at a later date if they're submitted after the deadline. And again, we anticipate announcing the pool of pre-qualified PACT Resource Team consultants in April sometime. And lastly, I'll say we have an email inbox, New York City PACT Resource Team at LISC.org. You can always send additional questions if you think of them after this session or as you're going through the application, you have questions, please do send them to that inbox. We're monitoring it frequently and we'll provide answers as best as we can. And thank you for attending this. We were really excited to hear from you and hope that you respond. And we also thank our partners and NYCHA for making this possible. So with that, once again, thank you, and we hope to hear from you soon.